We have a very special presentation today by our dear friend Brent Thalen from Calhoun County's GIS. He'll be sharing maps of the county. We have completed some maps that give us a sense of what does access to broadband look like in Calhoun. That's going to be very relevant as we go into BEAD planning. So that's our focus for today. Why don't we start with roll call? I'll read the names. Lynn will write it down. All right, first we have Lee Adams. Don't see him. Jeff Alba, don't see him. Paul Agnetuck. I think he might be on the phone.
Find my unmute button. I'm here.
Thank you. Sonia Elder.
I am here.
Thank you. Monique French. Today. Art Kale.
Here.
Thanks, Art. Mike Knopf.
I'm here.
Derek Perry.
I'm here.
Thanks, Derek. Paulette Porter. Not seeing Paulette today. Or Tina or Barry. Haley Snyder.
Here.
Thanks, Haley. Angela Myers.
Here.
Thanks, Angela. I'm not seeing Kathy. Linda Wilson. Angela Semifero.
Yep, right here.
Thanks, Angela. Dr. Paul Watson.
Here.
Here, he just walked in the room. Lori Upright.
Yes, here.
Thanks, Lori. And Kelly Scott.
I am here.
Thanks. We will take a motion to approve the minutes from the September 19th, 2023 meeting.
So moved.
Moved by Paul Watson. Can I get support from someone?
Got it.
I think that was Art.
Yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And for approval, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Aye.
Ready? And the opposite, same sign. Hearing none, that's approved. All right, let us move into these broadband maps. I'm very excited to show this to everybody. We've spent a lot of time working through a whole lot of data in order to be able to see exactly what we are working with here in Calhoun County for broadband. You know, one of the things that is really tricky with broadband maps is it's not always accurate. And so we're pulling together all the data sources that we can to come up with, some that we got directly from the internet service provider, lots of data from FCC specifically. This map is like basically Calhoun's map, right? So now we are able to see what does broadband look like in Calhoun County, so that as we start talking to internet service providers, and then especially working with those internet service providers to apply for BEAD funds, which is the next upcoming major funding opportunity, we really have a sense of what we're trying to cover. So Brent, if you're ready, we will have you share your screen.
Alrighty. Let me know if you can see that all right.
Yep.
Okay. So this is the county. Essentially, I took all of what you see here and all the little gray dots is a broadband service location as defined by the FCC. I took these gray dots and separated them according to their speeds. So I separated them and categorized them into 3 categories: served, unserved, and underserved. And we used BEAD's specifications for that. So anything that is currently being served under 25.3 is unserved. Anything under 100/20, but above 25/3 is underserved. And then anything at or above 100/20 was served. So I will just start by turning these layers on, and we will start with the unserved BSLs in the county. And these are all of the red dots that come up. Now there's a lot of data in here, so it might take some time for some of the layers to pop back on. But this is what we're looking at when we're looking at what we're calling unserved. I've got some numbers here, but I got to find them on my other screen. So in terms of raw numbers, we have what you're looking at right here. We have 9,340 unserved BSLs in the county. I will add to that, the yellow dots are going to be underserved, and that adds another 5,961. And then to fill the county, we've got the served in green.
So
go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, Brent. I just get excited and want to share kind of what we're seeing. I think that what we're really seeing here is, honestly, it looks a lot like the infrastructure maps that MyHigh had created. We know that fiber infrastructure exists in our cities, kind of down some main thoroughfares like Old 27 down to like Fredonia into Concha townships. Those areas have fiber infrastructure, and then we can see here that they are considered served. So it really does kind of match with what we knew. But when you're really looking at all of this, and granted, this is FCC data for the most part, and that includes some of the things that we have challenged. This reflects that as well. But all of the red dots are unserved, and then the yellows are underserved. Those are all locations that are eligible for BEAD funding. There's an asterisk on that, which we'll get to in a minute, but it's really important, I think, to be able to see where these large gaps are in the county, and that these areas really, we know, aren't able to reach 100/20 speeds, right? 100/20 speeds is kind of what we can consider strong access, and a lot of our community does not have it. We're talking about 15,000 households.
Right. The curveball that Lucy talked about, I'm going to turn off the served so we can get a little uncluttered. The curved ball is that when we consider Mercury fixed wireless, the Mercury fixed wireless numbers, because all of their reported speeds are above 100/20. So when you add Mercury licensed fixed wireless to this map, now all of a sudden, all of those light green things are served, which reduces the numbers, the numbers of underserved and unserved significantly. And I heard a question.
It reduces it down to 5,000. Yeah. So Mercury's numbers in the FCC say that people are served at 100/20. In general, though, we know that fixed wireless is not a solution, and in general, those speeds are suspect. In fact, you look at all the other fixed wireless data that comes from the FCC. In general, it's all over the place based on what people have experienced, what speed tests are telling us. But Mercury Wireless is saying that all of their customers are receiving 100/20, which it's very fair to say is unlikely. So this brings up a really interesting problem, because in BEAD, in the stuff that's coming from BEAD, the big question is whether or not fixed wireless will be considered served in the grant process. That's a big deal for Calhoun, because we're talking about the difference of 10,000 households no longer being eligible for BEAD funding. If Mercury and fixed wireless is considered served at 100/20. So it's kind of interesting.
What's the determinant factor for counting them served?
So you asked a great question.
Who do we appeal to?
Yes, who do we appeal to? Who's making the decision? That is a great question. So when it comes to the state making a decision about fixed wireless and even which households are eligible for BEAD funding, they are doing a map challenge process. So the map challenge process is going to happen in January, and I'm hoping also by then there will be a very firm decision on fixed wireless. For Calhoun, I would say in a perfect world, they would determine that fixed wireless is not considered served because of the downfalls of the technology. And then we can just say Mercury is not served, right? Because that's the type of technology. And so we don't have to count that. There are big lobbyists, Mike Watsa, who's one of our legal counsel, has said that there's a lot of push from companies that have fixed wireless and they want it to be counted. I can share more, but Kelly, do you want to jump in here? Go ahead.
I do. Yeah. So kind of where we are in the rules process right now is the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment, or BEAD, initial proposal. They're in the process of trying to finalize rules for the grant that's going to come out next year. And so in that process, every state has to submit their plan on how they're going to comply with all the requirements just to confirm that Michigan is eligible. And then Michigan, through our MyHigh office, will have the opportunity to create our own in-state rules for deploying the grant. So the state of Michigan is in the process of submitting documents to the NTIA, who is administering the BEAD federal grant, to explain how they're going to comply. And the first volume of that document talks about how the state of Michigan wants to identify unserved and underserved locations. So the BEAD rules, as it stands, they seem to allow fixed wireless to count themselves as served, right? So the state of Michigan is pushing back and saying, okay, we want to modify that, and we want to define the fixed wireless not as unserved, but underserved. So kind of the middle ground. So then what we have to figure out is, out of all the funding that's available, what difference does that make assuming there's not enough money to go around, right? Will we only be able to, our internet service providers, if they're going to focus first on unserved, that's a smaller number. If there's a bigger case or our application is sufficient, we're going to push them to apply to get all of our underserved and unserved locations, right? That's the ideal situation. So that's where we're at right now. Is it looks like the state of Michigan is pushing back, saying we want to modify those requirements, and then the NTIA kind of has to approve Michigan's plan. And Michigan's plan is, this first volume is out for comment right now. And like Lucy said, our lobbyists and all of the local governments are going to be saying, we'd really like you to kind of hardwire that rule in to exclude fixed wireless and just count them as unserved. I don't think that's going to happen. I think that underserved is kind of the happy medium. So, just by the amount of funding versus the demand, we may, only be able to, that'd be good, but we might only be able to get funding for the completely unserved and be stuck to some extent with the fixed wireless underserved locations, but at least they have something. That was a really long answer. Sorry.
No, that's fair. And I think that's super relevant for where BEAD's at. One thing that NTIA representative in Michigan, Ben Feynman, has told us is that we should really be challenging fixed wireless in the challenge process. That's a way to show that this 100/20 speed is not accurate for what they're experiencing. And so that first proposal does have map challenge as a part of it for the state of Michigan, which would start in January. It's a pretty cumbersome process, though, for individuals to submit speed tests to challenge what the FCC says. It requires 3 speed tests between the hours of 7 and 11 p.m., which from a communication standpoint sounds terrible. However, that is what we have as an option, and we are waiting to hear from Merit as well as the state and the MyHigh office about how do we do that. There's some software options that would kind of trigger emails automatically to people to have them do it, which then would at least help us be able to say, we know that Mercury Wireless is not serving 100/20. And so that's something to think about too as part of the map challenge.
Yeah, I think the other, so the challenge process, right, is part of this volume 1 document that only talks to 4 of the 19 requirements for the BEAD process. And that is one. So it looks to me like they're encouraging the states as the eligible entity to kind of take the lead to conduct that challenge process. So I think our job is to push pretty hard on the state, on the MyHigh office, to say, you know, don't let every single community or residents do this stuff on our own. Like, it would be really nice if the MyHigh office took a leadership role in that challenge process and sort of made it easy for us. Otherwise, it just seems like a disaster. So that the details of who's doing what and what the state will do for us and what we have to do for ourselves, I think is yet to be determined. And we've got, you know, several months, I think, to continue to flesh that out.
Mm-hmm. One thing that the state has said is they are not accepting individual challenges. They need to be bulk challenges that are submitted by local governments or nonprofits or other, you know, ISPs or agencies. So hopefully this Friday, Merit has a meeting with Ben Feynman and Eric Frederick that they'll be talking, you know, hopefully giving us some more information on how they are going to run this and take feedback from people's.
When the time comes to communicate and ask to individuals to run that test, I mean, we're very, very interested institutionally in supporting that. And we've got a captive audience with our students and our employees who I think would be motivated if it came, you know, as a pass-through, right?
Right.
All your information is there, but then us pushing that is very important to help them.
Yep.
On the end, because, you know, we still have like 35 to 40% of our students still working online.
Wow.
Even though we always start trying to, you know, before COVID, we were at 75% in person. Even though we offer that much, they always self-select because of convenience,
right.
Increasingly the online environment. So if there's something that we can do to assist on that communication piece, please forward our way, and we'll do our best to push out to try to make sure you get a good number of individuals that bulk showcase the breadth of the county. So
yeah. I really do think Calhoun is kind of interesting with this map, just like the way that fixed wireless has been a solution for rural communities. It really shows. And now, you know, as we start thinking about solutions, it's a huge difference. 10,000 households maybe not being eligible is pretty big. So definitely some interesting things to think about. Another piece of that proposal 1, which that's not the right word, phase 1, volume 1 for MyHigh is in addition to the map challenge, they're also identifying community anchor institutions. They have identified like, you know, 6 or 7 different types of institutions throughout the state that they are calling community anchor institutions, and they want to know what their access is like at those places. And so, as you can imagine, that really does include all of your organizations. It includes governments, it includes schools, of course, it includes even zoos and childcare centers and all kinds of different things. And there are how many in Calhoun that have been identified?
MyHigh has identified 400.
400 in Calhoun County. And we're still trying to understand how they're going to understand connectivity with those institutions, but we do also see that as a part of kind of the challenge process in the state to understand connectivity throughout different areas. And so we'll also help with kind of that process of getting whatever information is necessary for the state. We're pretty tapped into what the state is looking for, and we're starting to see how they're going to do this process, but not entirely sure the how. And so we'll just keep you guys informed on that piece of it.
The good thing is the NTIA, you know, gave the recommendation to the state, and the state has made it even more robust. So it doesn't just include colleges and government facilities and, you know, the list from NTIA. It also, Michigan wants to include the food banks, the YMCAs, the, you know, those type of places as well. So they've made it more robust for Michigan.
And this volume 1 document does say that the MyHigh office will run the challenge process to determine eligible unserved and underserved locations for the anchor institutions. So We just don't know exactly how, they'll do that.
So that's where we are on this map. I do anticipate sending out maybe a PDF of the maps just so that you all have them as well. But we wanted to show you the different layers just because I think it tells the whole story. Whereas if you were to just see this and we were to say that these green dots are served, it's not really the whole picture. Just because fixed wireless is a little bit of a elephant in the Calhoun County room.
Yeah, and Lucy, I just want to add too, I always try to come back to like big picture context, because we've been doing for 2 years work that looks like it's trying to figure out how unserved and served we are, right? So what we had originally was the merit survey, which had a little bit of participation. The FCC maps have, undergone all those updates. There was like basically census tract data available originally, and then sort of some what we called crowdsourcing, I'll call anecdotal information that like convinced us that all this work needs to be done. Well, now all the work that Brent and Lucy and Lynn and through that challenge process, now that they're dots, these are actually addresses, right? Like down to the buildings, and that's the difference from what we didn't have before. And we can actually share this with the service providers as they're wanting to strategically partner with us to submit this next round of application. We've just come a long way in the specificity of the data that they can really get down to the address level. And this was after them, being, I guess, open enough to share back their, Comcast, for example, their challenge process. So that work was really important. And I still think we're probably ahead of a lot of counties. Maybe we'll find that out on Friday when we meet with the merit convened group of our peer counties.
I agree. I mean, Kelly, you bring up a point that's really relevant. When we began all this work, when we started the task force, the FCC was only making determinations about access by census block. And so for us to be able to now get this granular, we are light years ahead of where we used to be. And the whole FCC map is that way. But I think also even just the fact that we're seeing the state do a map challenge process before they go into the BEAD grant really shows that they are trying to get a handle on this data more so than the FCC, because we've always said FCC data is flawed. We've definitely seen that in Calhoun. I think Mercury is an example of how it's just not quite totally accurate, because those speeds would not be that uniform in reality. And so now we're able to just really get a handle on this, so that when we talk with internet service providers, even when we talk to individuals, we just have a way better sense of what's going on in the county and where internet service providers are covering. I want to also say that this was a tremendous amount of data that Brent processed, because we have every single provider in here broken down into served, underserved, and unserved. Each has a different layer, plus the data that we received from the internet service providers, plus some RDOF data. So we have all kinds of information now that we're able to show here on the map. And then one other thing that I'll add related to this process is that in that volume 1 that MyHigh released, they actually released a list, like a CSV file, of every unserved and underserved location in the state. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take our map and we're going to compare it to that MyHigh data. They say it's just preliminary, so we'll keep an eye out for like finals and stuff, but at least now we can use this map, compare it to MyHigh's, see where there are gaps, and then we're able to be smarter maybe about our challenge process. We can also really dig in where there are gaps or where there's challenges, and so I anticipate that that'll be the next steps. Brent, do you have anything else that you want to add?
Nope. That was it.
Thank you for your labor on this.
No problem.
It's a lot of work.
It's a ton of work, yeah. All right. Well, we can move on to the next part of our agenda, which is just about these meetings. After our last meeting, Mac McCullough, who was our board chair, stepped down. He will still be serving on the digital equity subcommittee, but has decided not to participate in the broadband task force for various reasons. So we are looking for a chair for this task force. And after some conversations with Kelly about this work, you know, you guys have been with us this whole process, which I just so appreciate. We would like to move these meetings down to quarterly. We think that that would ensure that we have strong updates for you guys when we meet. Some of this work is going to take some time. Also, you know, we're doing a lot of stuff behind the scenes, like even this map work took a lot of time. And so we believe that by meeting quarterly, we'll just ensure that we have really strong updates for you guys each time we meet and not, you know, wasting anybody's time. So that's the plan. That's what we're thinking moving forward. And we would be interested in a chair for the task force. If anyone's interested, you can also just let me know offline, and then we can plan accordingly. Any questions? Any questions even about the map? We didn't really talk about any questions about that, but any questions from anyone on the task force? So our next steps are really going to be continuing with the maps, especially as a new challenge process comes up, and then working with internet service providers to think about what our applications for the BEAD grant will be. And we will keep you all updated. If there's updates in the meantime, we can send emails.
Yeah, I would just mention, I want to make sure that we have, but make sure that everybody has a chance to, you know, as much detail you want, read the 5-year BEAD plan that the NTIA has put out, and also read MyHigh's volume 1 plan to get about an understanding of where the state is at. And then just mention, we've got a couple of events coming up that county staff are going to. The Merit Broadband, I don't know, I'll call it their annual conferences in a few weeks. And then 123Net, one of the private providers, is doing a BEAD summit for a day in November. And so we may have some updates to send out following those events.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. At both events, My High office and NTIA Ben Feynman, who's the Michigan rep, will be there. So we will hear from them, which is helpful. So moving on in the agenda to member updates, does anyone have anything that they'd like to share, you know, related to internet or broadband? I might ask, I mean, you don't have to necessarily share your experience, but Mike shared with us when he walked in that MEC is coming down the road 2 houses away. I wanted to just mention that here, just so folks on the task force know that MEC, which is an RDOF recipient, RDOF is the Rural Development Fund. There's another word in there, but I don't know what it is. But it's the Rural Development Fund that received broadband funding years ago. They're finally getting into Calhoun County with fiber, specifically in a rural area, which is pretty significant. We're seeing them in East Leroy, and you said you're in Burlington Township?
Yeah, Burlington Township, only 2-3 miles south of East Leroy.
Okay.
Right up to 66.
Okay,
So
yeah.
we're running through the front yard, supposedly in the next 2 weeks.
Awesome. It's really interesting if you're on any of these like community Facebook groups, hearing people talk about it. You know, what we're hearing is that there's a 500 or 100, maybe even, you know, waived fee to have it installed. It's interesting seeing people react to those amounts. You know, I think some people are like, listen, I'll pay $500 so I finally have reliable internet. And then we're also hearing that MEC seems to be working with people so that they can have that fee waived, which I think says a lot about the company. You know, but it's interesting. It's interesting to see it happening. It's interesting to see people in rural areas really grateful and reacting to fiber being available. Just shows how powerful it is. Love to see that.
I think we're going to see additional, as far as the road department goes, we're seeing a lot of permitting coming through for all different areas. The most recent has been up around Lee Clarence Township. So I think it's something we're continuing to see, not just in Athens and Burlington now. So just wanted to add that.
Awesome. Thanks, Erin. Do you know who the internet service provider is up in Clarence? I would guess maybe Springport or Spring.
I would say ACD.net is the one that's in Eaton County.
Right.
There is, I don't know, for whatever reason, I can't think of it right now. It's the same company who's looking into, they've asked for a lot of right of ways. It's the same one that's in Athens, Burlington, but for whatever reason, it's not coming.
It's MEC then. That would be MEC.
Maybe it's MEC. Maybe it's just that's MEC, but maybe it's the contractor that I'm thinking of that's requesting all the right of way data. I should have looked that up.
Aaron, you'll know them as Midwest Energy and Communications.
Yes, thank you. Yes, that's it. Midwest. Thank you.
Yeah, and that's who is inputting in the fiber down in that area. So that's really interesting. Thanks for sharing, Erin.
You're welcome.
Any other member updates?
Lucy, if you might, half a sentence.
Yeah.
You've all heard about the NTIA and the FCC. The FCC has been stymied for 2 years with a 2-2 tie, Republican Democrat, and Senate finally approved President Biden's most recent appointment, and so we have broken the tie, and we're hoping that there'll be many things happening at the FCC. You may have heard about the internet neutrality rules coming back. That's a good thing for consumers. We're also hoping that they will maybe be a little more able to move the ball on the maps, because they're sort of in charge of the maps. A lot of criticism. So we're hoping for better things than we've seen in the last 2 years. That's it.
Great. Thanks, Mike. Great. Any other questions or comments? I appreciate you all so much for joining us. We can wrap this up early. If you do have any questions in the meantime, let us know. We will send those maps out, and I'll also include those documents again, just in case you want to see them, both the 5-year plan for related to the funding, and then volume 1, which gets into the specifics of kind of the prep for the BEAD funding, which is related to the map challenges and the community anchor institution definition and what they're looking for there. So we'll send those out after this. Thank you all very much for joining us.